If you're working hard to lose weight, there's a good chance you're putting all your attention on the wrong part of the process. Most people are told that fat loss is easy to understand. Eat fewer calories, move more, and burn more energy than you take in. While that advice isn't completely wrong, it leaves out a huge part of the story. Have you ever stopped and wondered what actually happens to your body fat when you lose weight? Where does that fat go? How does it leave your body? And before your body can burn fat for energy, what has to happen inside your body first? The reality is that many people spend months trying to lose fat without ever learning how the process actually works. They count calories, spend hours doing cardio, and push themselves through exhausting workouts. But if you ask them what happens inside a fat cell as body fat disappears, most wouldn't be able to explain it. That matters because once you understand the biology behind fat loss, many of the popular myths, miracle solutions, and confusing fitness advice suddenly become much easier to see through. In this video from Physio Decoded, we're going to follow the complete journey of body fat. We'll look at how fat is stored, what causes it to be released, where it travels next, and the exact place where it's finally converted into usable energy. Along the way, you'll also discover why one of the most common beliefs about burning fat is only partly accurate. Before we can understand how fat is burned, we first need to understand what body fat actually is. Many people think fat is just one simple substance that sits under the skin and causes weight gain. But your body contains different kinds of fat, and each one plays a different role. One type is called subcutaneous fat. This is the layer of fat located just beneath your skin. It's the fat you can pinch around your stomach, arms, hips, or thighs. It's also the fat that covers muscle definition, making features like your abdominal muscles less visible. But there's another kind of fat that most people never see because it's stored much deeper inside the body. This is called visceral fat, and it's far more important than many people realize. Unlike subcutaneous fat, visceral fat surrounds your internal organs. It wraps around organs like your liver, intestines, and other structures inside your abdominal cavity. Both kinds of fat act as energy reserves, but visceral fat has received much more attention from scientists because having too much of it is closely linked to serious health problems. High amounts of visceral fat have been associated with insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and long-term inflammation throughout the body. This is why the location of body fat can be just as important as the total amount you carry. Even though these different types of fat are stored in different places, they all have one thing in common. They're kept inside specialized cells known as fat cells. You can think of fat cells as tiny storage containers designed specifically to hold extra energy until your body needs it. Their main purpose is to safely store excess fuel for future use. As more energy is stored, these cells expand and become larger over time. This brings up an interesting question. When someone loses body fat, what actually happens to those fat cells? Do they disappear completely? Do they die off? Or is something else happening inside them? To answer that, we need to zoom in to the level of a single fat cell because that's where the real process of fat loss begins. Most people imagine that fat burning starts during a difficult workout, an intense cardio session, or a long run. They picture themselves sweating heavily and assume that's the moment body fat begins disappearing. Surprisingly, that's not where fat loss actually starts. The first step happens deep inside a fat cell, completely hidden from view. Earlier, we described fat cells as storage containers. Inside each one is stored energy packaged in molecules called triglycerides. You can think of triglycerides as your body's long-term fuel reserves, carefully stored away until extra energy is needed. As long as those triglycerides stay locked inside the fat cell, nothing changes. The cell stays full, the fat tissue remains the same size, and your body fat doesn't decrease. Before fat can ever be used for energy, your body has to unlock those stored reserves. This process is called lipolysis. Although the name sounds complicated, the concept is straightforward. The word lipo refers to fat, while lysis means breaking apart. So, lipolysis simply means the breakdown of stored fat. Whenever your body requires additional energy, it sends hormonal signals to your fat cells. In response, the triglycerides inside those cells begin to split apart. Each triglyceride breaks down into one glycerol molecule and three fatty acids. For the first time, the energy that was trapped inside the fat cell becomes available for the rest of the body. Those fatty acids leave the fat cell and enter your bloodstream. As more stored fat is released, the fat cell gradually becomes smaller. The important thing to understand is that the fat cell itself doesn't disappear. It simply contains less stored energy than before. This shrinking of the fat cell marks the first real stage of fat loss. But here's the part that surprises many people. Just because fat has been released from a fat cell doesn't mean your body has actually burned it. Those are two completely separate steps. Releasing stored fat and using that fat for energy are not the same thing. And understanding the difference is one of the biggest keys to understanding how fat loss really works. Once those fatty acids enter the bloodstream, their journey is far from over. At this point, it might seem like the difficult part is finished. The fat cell has already released its stored fuel, and the cell itself has started shrinking. It feels logical to assume the body must now be burning that fat. But that's not always what happens. This is where the science becomes even more interesting. After leaving the fat cell, the fatty acids travel through your bloodstream. Think of your bloodstream as a massive transportation system, moving supplies throughout your body. It constantly delivers oxygen, nutrients, hormones, and many other substances wherever they're needed. In this case, it's also carrying fatty acids. However, simply circulating through the bloodstream doesn't guarantee those fatty acids will be used for energy. It only means they're available if the body decides it needs them. That difference is incredibly important. Imagine taking money out of your savings account. Once it's withdrawn, it isn't locked away anymore. But until you actually spend it, that money hasn't really been used. Fatty acids work in much the same way. Leaving the fat cell is only one step in the process. Whether they're eventually burned for energy depends on what your body needs next. Fatty acids behave in a very similar way. Once they enter your bloodstream, they don't simply disappear. They have to be absorbed by cells that actually need energy, such as muscle cells, heart cells, and many other tissues throughout the body. If those cells require fuel, the fatty acids can be used. But if there isn't an immediate demand for energy, those same fatty acids may eventually be transported back into storage. This is an important point that many people overlook. Just because fat leaves a fat cell doesn't mean it's permanently gone. Released fat is not the same as burned fat. This misunderstanding is one of the biggest sources of confusion in the fitness world. Many people focus entirely on getting fat out of fat cells. But very few stop to ask what happens after that. Where does the fat actually go? For body fat to truly disappear, those fatty acids have to reach a very specific place inside your cells, a place capable of converting stored fat into usable energy. Surprisingly, there's only one location in the body where this can happen. It's a microscopic structure found inside nearly every cell. And without it, burning fat would be impossible. That structure is called the mitochondria, and understanding its role completely changes the way we think about fat loss. Although mitochondria are incredibly small, you could fit thousands of them inside a single cell. They perform one of the most important jobs in the entire body. They're often called the powerhouses of the cell, because they're responsible for producing the energy that keeps your cells functioning. You'll find especially high numbers of mitochondria in parts of the body that constantly need energy, including your muscles, heart, and brain. Their mission is simple: take available fuel, convert it into usable energy, and power the countless processes that keep you alive. Now let's go back to those fatty acids that were released from your fat cells. After traveling through the bloodstream, some eventually arrive at cells that need fuel. Once inside those cells, the fatty acids are transported into the mitochondria. This is where fat burning truly begins. Inside the mitochondria, the fatty acids go through a process known as beta oxidation. You don't need to remember the scientific name. What matters is what the process does. It breaks large fatty acid molecules into smaller components that can be used to produce a tremendous amount of energy. In fact, fat is one of the body's richest energy reserves. Gram for gram, it stores far more energy than carbohydrates, which explains why the body can survive for days, weeks, or even longer by relying on stored body fat under certain circumstances. However, there's one essential requirement for this entire process to work: oxygen. Without enough oxygen, your body cannot completely break down fat to produce energy. That single fact explains one of the biggest misconceptions surrounding exercise and fat loss. Your body has multiple ways of generating energy, but only one of those systems is capable of using fat as its primary fuel source. The others depend mostly on different forms of stored energy. That naturally raises an important question. If your body has several energy systems, why is only one able to burn fat? The answer completely changes the way we think about exercise, cardio, and effective fat loss. Now that we know fat is actually burned inside the mitochondria, we can answer another common fitness question. Why don't all types of exercise burn fat equally? The explanation lies in the different ways your body produces energy. Most people think the body uses a single energy source, but in reality, it relies on three separate energy systems, each designed for different situations. The first is called the phosphocreatine system. Think of it as your body's instant backup battery. It delivers energy almost immediately, making it perfect for explosive activities like sprinting at full speed, lifting a heavy weight, or performing a powerful jump. The downside is that it runs out very quickly, usually after only 5 to 10 seconds of maximum effort. Once that fuel is gone, your body switches to another system. The second system is anaerobic glycolysis. This powers hard efforts that typically last anywhere from around 10 seconds to a couple of minutes. Activities like intense cycling, repeated sprints, or high-effort intervals rely heavily on this system. It can produce energy quickly, but it also causes fatigue to build much faster. Just like the first energy system, it isn't designed to burn fat. Finally, we come to the third system, the aerobic energy system. This is the one responsible for powering activities that continue for longer periods, such as walking, jogging, swimming, cycling, or even quietly sitting and watching this video. Unlike the other two systems, the aerobic system uses oxygen to create energy. Because oxygen is available, your cells can fully utilize the mitochondria. And because the mitochondria are involved, fat can finally be used as fuel. This makes the aerobic system unique because it's the only energy system capable of burning fat efficiently. At this point, a lot of common fitness advice suddenly begins to make more sense. But it also leads to another interesting question. If only the aerobic system burns fat, does that automatically mean slow, steady cardio is the most effective way to lose body fat? The answer isn't as simple as many people think. This is exactly where the famous fat-burning zone enters the discussion. It seems like we've solved the puzzle. If the aerobic system burns fat, then staying in that zone should logically lead to the greatest amount of fat loss. But the reality is more complicated. The idea of the fat-burning zone has been around for years, and you've probably seen it displayed on treadmills or fitness trackers. The basic concept is true.